All right, so the European physical notes. This is the first section of notes over Europe. And so this is what we're going to talk about today is the physical notes of Europe. Okay, so landforms. So all of the landforms in Europe were created through a process called glaciation, which is where you have glaciers that form and move as they're melting, right? Which makes sense. So think of like a huge block of ice, and the climate around it starts to warm, and that block of ice starts to slowly melt. And as that big block of ice starts to slowly melt, it's actually sitting on top of small amounts of water, which causes the block of ice to move. And then just multiply that process by thousands of years, and you will see that block of ice completely disappear. But what will be left behind is a bunch of water and markings and indentations and mountains, and rivers, and valleys, and all this stuff left behind. So all the landforms in Europe that we're talking about today were formed by wind, water, and ice, and this is all part of this process called glaciation. Okay, which makes sense. This is how lakes and rivers are created. As they go through, they carve out the landscape, right? And when they melt, they leave behind water. So if they create an indentation and then it melts, then that water will stay in the indentation that it made until it evaporates and the water cycle takes over and et cetera, et cetera. But initially, all of these waterways were created by glaciers. Okay, so mountains, there are a few mountain ranges that we're going to discuss today. The Alps are the first one. They form a crescent shape near the southern border of France. They're in northern Italy and go throughout Austria and Switzerland as well. The tallest peak in the Alps is Mount Blanc, and it is the tallest point at 15,782 feet. Okay, in the Alps, they played an important role in the history of a lot of the ancient or older um, governments and societies in Europe, right? You guys have heard of Rome. In my world civilizations class, we're talking about Rome right now, and we discussed how important the Alps were to Rome's ability to develop and flourish. Because, I mean, guys, at the time of Rome, people they weren't wearing shoes, they didn't have like pants, they weren't wearing full clothing, and so what are you gonna do? You're gonna hike through a 2,000 foot long mountain range that's up to 15,000 feet in elevation, barefoot with just essentially a dress through the cold and the snow and the glacier, and you're gonna march and walk through that and then go attack this developing country. So the Alps really protected Italy at the time, Rome, from being invaded by outsiders, which gave them a leg up on everybody else. Because all these people were fighting one another while Rome was just like living their best life and developing. Okay, so the Alps played an important role in ancient history, and they still play a current important role in their current climate. Okay, the Carpathian Mountains, these are right here. They're in Romania and Slovakia. They're located in Eastern Europe. It's about 1,000 miles long, just a little bit over, and they have a large forest, the Carpathian Forest. It's very rocky and lots of ridges, and then at the base of the mountain, there is a large forest. It's really like kind of like the Patagonia. It's a very stark and dry and easy looking place, but it can be kind of intimidating because it's very foggy and dark, and there's these big old trees and these rocky mountains. They have a very interesting look. The Ural Mountains, these are in Russia. They form a natural border between Europe and Asia. So the Ural Mountains are right here. And Russia is a pretty interesting place because Russia is technically in Europe, but it's also in Asia. And so anything to the west of the Ural Mountains is Europe, and anything to the east of it is Asia. So you can see that about a third of Russia is in Europe. And this is where most people in Russia live. And the part that's in Asia, once you get over here, it's almost uninhabitable. It's just pretty much ice. And we'll talk about that when we discuss Russia specifically. But the Ural Mountains are a very important geographical border between Europe and Asia. Okay, and the Ural Mountains contain rich deposits of iron ore, which they use to make steel, coal, which can be burned to produce electricity, and precious stones like gold, silver, rubies, diamonds, etc. Okay, so now the Northern European Plain, it is located right here throughout the top of what we would call Western Europe, across the central part of Europe and into Eastern Europe and through it. It contains very good soil. It has something called loess, which is a word that was created by the Europeans. And essentially, it just means that the soil is left behind by glaciers. So the soil was like naturally turned and tilled by glaciers that moved throughout the continent. And in the Northern European Plain, you see lots of rivers. And we're going to talk about those rivers in a minute. But the rivers are important because they provide water to the area, and in ancient times provided transportation and a way to irrigate water naturally to be able to water crops. And current day, these rivers have been, kind of controlled, and they no longer flood, but they do provide very important shipping ways, transportation, and they still have a very important purpose. Okay, so water systems. So now we're going to talk about the water systems that they have as well as the rivers. And so Europe has 300 miles of coastline. And I'm going to back up and you can see what I'm talking about here. So the coastline is right here. You can see it. And the coastline is very important. And with the coastline, they have, over those 300 miles, they've built dikes and polders. And dikes are large banks of dirt and rock that keep water back. So just off the coast, like less than a mile off the coast, they build these dikes. And they use concrete and dirt to build them, but essentially they build a wall from the ocean floor up to the surface of the ocean, and it keeps the ocean current from moving in closer to land. So this is a way of controlling, rogue waves and other things that would come in the ocean. And then what they've also done is they've built polders, and this is reclaimed land that was once underwater. So what they do is they actually build, essentially they're like building these islands, man-made islands, but these islands aren't a true island because they connect to the coastline. So they're kind of extending their coast out into the ocean. And this is important because it allows them to expand areas in which they don't have enough physical space. And so with these polders, they will build windmills, they'll build towns, they'll build cities, they'll build all different kinds of things. So like you guys have heard of Amsterdam before, about half of Amsterdam is actually built on polders. Okay, so it's pretty cool. The Scandinavian Peninsula, they have fjords, which are carved out long, narrow, and steep inlets of water. They are ocean water that has, filled in this area, and they carve their way into the main landmass of the Scandinavian countries, so Sweden, Finland, Norway, and Denmark. And they're very beautiful. Okay, rivers. So the Thames, this is the Thames River. It's not the Thames or the Thames, it's Thames. Okay, like a pair of Timberlands, they're Thames, right? This is the Thames River, and this river is important because it actually accesses the English Channel, the Atlantic Ocean, and goes inwards through London and goes through the main cities, Hampton, Windsor, Henley, and then Oxford, and makes its way almost completely to Wales. It ends in what we call Wessex, which is the western part of England. So this river is very, very important. It's a very historic river, and it's one of the most populated rivers. Like they have a huge population that lives along this river. So it's very, very important to England. And then again, imagine during medieval times or during ancient times, this river was incredibly important because it allowed them to transport goods, services, people, and military through England very quickly. The Rhine River, this is the most important river in Western Europe. The Rhine starts up here and makes its way all the way down and through Switzerland. It's a very important river. You can go on cruises of the Rhine River now, and if you go on one of those cruises, you will pass over 700 medieval castles. So during medieval times, this river was very important, and all the different kingdoms were built along it. Okay, the Danube, this is the most important river in Eastern Europe. This river starts in Germany, and it makes its way all the way across Eastern Europe and out into the Black Sea. Okay, so it's very important. And then the Main, they call it just the Main-Danube Canal. We know what a canal is. It's a man-made body of water. This links the North Sea, which is by England, and the Black Sea, which is over here in between Europe and Asia. And so just to kind of back up, this is the North Sea. This is the North Sea up here. The main canal connects the Rhine, and then there's a canal that they built right here. And that connects to the Danube, and then that goes across out into the Black Sea. So you can, hypothetically, you can get on a boat in London and sail from London down the Rhine, down the Danube, through the main Danube Canal, into the Black Sea, and then into what is the Middle East or Asia. Okay, so very important trade route, and very important for shipping and transportation. And then the natural resources they have in Europe, they have coal, iron ore, okay, which is important for electricity production and for steel production. They have oil, which is important for producing. In Europe, they mainly produce diesel because that's what they use in their cars. They don't use gasoline, they use diesel. And then natural gas, which is important for heating, and other like cooking goods and stuff like that. So it's an important resource that they use. They also have peat, and peat is a vegetable matter found in swamps. This is what peat looks like. It kind of looks like charcoal briquettes. And what it is peat is like soil that's been pressed hard together, and it becomes very flammable. And over time and over pressure, it eventually turns into coal. So peat is used to produce natural gas. Okay, and that's it for the notes. Thanks for watching.